Go back to the rules, okay? You can ask as many questions as you want. The only thing you have to do is raise your hand first, okay? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the questions. I'm going to say who the question's from, and I'm going to read it, and I'm going to give Granddaddy a chance to answer the question, and we're going to try to keep the answers down to like 3 or 4 minutes each, so we can go through all the questions, okay? Now, you guys can come and go as you wish. You can go to the bathroom, you can go and come back or whatever. The only rule is, in order for you to maybe win the best questions, you have to be here when your question's asked, and you don't know when that's going to be asked, okay? And some of you did too, so I'm not going to read both of yours at once. I'll read one of them, then I'll come back later to do the other one. Fair enough? Okay. Anytime you're ready, you want to pause, I can pause. You can go take a break.
Guys, I'm ready.
Okay, well, I'm going to get out of the picture then. We are recording now.
That's okay.
And
Since he's the moderator, he can stay in the picture if he wants to.
now I'm going to be
This is
off
Steve's
camera here. Okay, the first question is from Molly. And it says, was it hard to leave your family and go fight the war?
Molly, that's a very profound question. My goodness, that's a very.
Isn't that a great question?
I helped her.
Oh, did you?
She asked me for a little bit of help. It was her idea to base it on that.
Well, actually, the truth of it is, it wasn't as hard to go do that as it was when I left right after I finished high school. I finished high school, I had only been 16 for 2 months. And it was time for me to go to work that summer, so I did. And I was very sad when I left to go to work. I came to Washington to work for my uncle during the summer. And then after I was here for a couple of years going to college and night school and all of that. And when it was time to go, I was ready to go. I was really excited about it. And I went down, said goodbye. I had enlisted, and that was it. That's another longer story that is really kind of interesting the way it came about. But
Well, how did it come about?
well, I was working in the White House at the time, and I only had 2 years college. And to get into naval aviation, which is where I wanted to be, you had to have 4 years of college. And I had actually been offered an appointment to the Naval Academy, to the Military Academy, and to the Naval Academy. And General Watson, Paul Watson was his name, was Franklin Roosevelt's military aide, and he took a liking to me, I guess. And he kept saying, "Well, why don't you go to the Military Academy?" And I really didn't care to go. I didn't like your uniforms for one thing, and I didn't. I wanted to fly, and I wanted to fly in the Navy. So one day he was coming back from lunch, and he stopped by. I was sitting in an office at one of the doors that day, and he came in and said, "We're going to have a new program. We're going to announce it in the next week. That we're going to accept fellows who have 2 years of college, and we're going to give them a Naval Academy program in about 18 months without the social graces. You're going to have to work very hard, but if you want it, that's the very thing you've been talking about." So I was very excited, and when they announced it a couple weeks later, I went down to 1401 G Street Northwest in Washington, the Naval Recruitment Office, and got myself, took a physical, and I was all set to go. And I was delighted. I was really excited about it. I wanted to fly, and that's how it. So it was not hard to leave home to go into service, because I was going to do something I really wanted to do.
Great, good answer.
Okay.
Okay, it says, this one is from Rebecca, and it says, we're gonna shift from the war and go back to the farm here, and it says, how old were you when you started working on the farm?
Well, actually, the farm thing was one we actually lived. When we went down after Mother's funeral, remember, across the street was that lot, that property where we lived. So we lived in town, but Dad always owned 1 or 2 farms, and every summer we had to work on the farm. So I started, gee whiz, over there when I was about 11 years old, 11 or 12 years old, working on the farm in the summertime.
Okay, good.
Like David's age.
On a related subject, this is from Andrew. It says, what were the chores that you had to do on your first chores that you had to do on the farm, and how much was your allowance, if you got any?
Well, number one, there was no allowance. I never had an allowance in my life, so that covers that subject. We had several acres of land actually where we were, and we had always had a big garden, in a very good one. and we also usually had a cow for milk and all that stuff. So I had to do chores around there, work in the garden, and feed the cow and all that kind of stuff. And those were the kinds of things. But we worked in the garden all summer. But as soon as I was big enough, I had to go work on the farm. Dad was a great believer that idleness was devil's workshop, and so he didn't give us any time to be idle, and we were kept very busy.
Okay, we're gonna change the format here.
Okay, Wesley had his hand up first. Wesley, your question.
What was your first job?
My first job. You mean a job that I made money or that I just
In the
worked?
war.
Like you worked to make a living.
Well, Wesley, that's a very profound question because my dad was in the hospital when I was about 13 or 14 years old, and I started going to our store to work then. And so I worked in that store after school, and oftentimes closed the store at night, and I would go home after that and do my work. I wasn't getting any pay for that, but I didn't actually earn any money until after I came to Washington and started working for my uncle who lived here. And he had a plumbing and heating business, and I went to work for him. And I learned all about putting plumbing in houses and how to put air conditioning in houses and all of that stuff. And at night I was going to school at George Washington University. So that's the first time I started making any money. I remember one summer I worked on a farm, and they were hauling these white flint rock that they used to crush to build roads and things with. And I got 15 cents a day for loading rocks on that truck. The first summer, and the second summer I got 25 cents a day. And I worked all day. And the funny thing was, this uncle of mine had this truck. I think my dad might have owned it. And the trucks in those days weren't very powerful, and you were on a little dirt road, and you'd load that thing with rocks, and he wasn't figuring out too well how many you could haul, and the truck couldn't get up the hill. So he'd have to let the truck roll back down the hill, and he would get a running start and try to get up this steep hill, and we would get out and we would stick a rock under the wheel so it wouldn't roll back down, because he wasn't a good driver, and he didn't understand mechanics, I don't think, all that well. So the truck would stall out, and we'd put our rock under the wheel and hope. He said, "Stay out of the way." But anyway, we'd put the rock under the wheel and hope when they get it started again, try to get over the hill. It would have been, if it wasn't such hard work, it would have been funny. If you'd make a movie today, people wouldn't believe it. But it's 15 cents a day and then 25 cents a day. And then when I came to Washington, I got room and board and $7 a week. And I kept a little diary every day so that I wouldn't waste any money. And if I bought a Coke, which was 5 cents, I wrote down my Coke so I wouldn't spend more than 35 or 40 cents a week. So that all the rest of it I could save if I was going to go to school. Next question. Yeah, Rebecca.
In the war, did you still believe in God?
I sure did. I never forgot believing in God. The fact was that, remember I wrote the letter last summer that I don't know if you all have talked about, but the important thing about that letter was what's happening to our country and the lack of that kind of faith and that commitment. I had a little New Testament that I took with me, I carried with me, and I also had a Bible I took with me, and I always read, just about every day I would read the 23rd Psalm. So yea, though I walk through the valley of shadow of death, I'll fear no evil, for thou art with me. And so that was a very strengthening thing for me, and it meant a lot. Good question. But I know this too, that some of the things that I got into, I could not have survived. As I look back today, I don't see how I'm alive. But it was really because my parents and other people were really praying for me. Next question. Danny.
He took my answer about your dad, but I have another one. When you went to war, did any of your good friends die?
Yes, they did. I have a lot of them did. I have a picture right here that I was looking through even last night, and here, this picture is a picture of 4 fellows. We went downtown to what was called the Mayfair Restaurant, and it was right next to the, what is today the Warner Theater, I guess. And there were 4 of us at this table. We went out to dinner, and the strongest thing we ever drank in our lives was iced tea, but 2 of the 4 well, this was the one, Eddie Landstreet. No, as a matter of fact, 3 of us came back. This over Europe to Belgium, and then
Oh, that's the
Vietnam.
yeah.
no, this is all World War II.
Yeah.
This was a serious war.
Yeah.
Can you hold the picture up again? I don't know if I really got that picture very well.
Well, I was running through
Who died again? Eddie. That guy on the white. On the
the one over here that you can't see quite as well. His name is Eddie Landstreet, and he's flying over the hump. That was in India, when they were flying when the Flying Tigers were trying to help China survive, and they were trying to fly supplies in, and he got lost over there someplace. He was either shot down or flew into a mountain, which often happened in the bad weather.